So today we are talking about the pros and cons of buying versus renting and some of the benefits and non-benefits to both buying and renting. We're going to start with the cons of renting and some of the things that make renting hard. And first off, we've got rent increases. So as a renter, you have no guarantee that your rent isn't going to go up at the end of your lease. So that's one thing that renters run into as a problem. Another thing that you run into as a renter is you're not creating wealth. And I'll talk a little bit about this and as one of the pros of buying is that you're building equity as you pay off a mortgage, right? Whereas if you're renting, you're really paying someone else's mortgage off and helping them build equity in the property. You have no tax benefits when you're a renter. As a home buyer, you do have some tax benefits, and I'll share a little bit about those later on. One of the biggest problems that renters run into is the rules that landlords have, especially when it comes to pets. Here in Utah, there is a huge shortage for pets and pet availability for rentals. So there's just a huge demand for rentals that allow pets. There's a large variance between what pets are allowed, and a lot of that has to do with the landlord's insurance and things like that. It's really difficult when you have a dog or cats or whatever pets you may have to find properties, and you tend to pay a premium when you rent a property that allows pets. On that same note, you have less stability, so there's no guarantee that at the end of your lease, your landlord's not going to kick you out and rent to someone else. Another thing is you are locked in usually with a 12-month lease, depending on what your lease agreement is. And sometimes you're going to get stuck in a crappy house with a crappy landlord, and you don't know until you've already moved in. Maybe you had to rent the property unseen. You're coming from out of state, things like that. That is one of the biggest cons of renting, is you are stuck for that time. So moving on to the cons of buying a home. So home ownership is wonderful. It's great. But there are definitely things that make it difficult, and here's a couple of reasons why you may choose not to buy a home. Number one is your maintenance and repairs. So as a renter, you can call your landlord any time of day, night, say, hey, there's leaking water, there's a problem with the heater, whatever it is, and they are in charge of taking care of you, taking care of the repair, and making sure that the property is in good condition. When you buy a home, that is now your responsibility. So with that comes along unexpected costs. You don't know if your sewer line's going to break 6 months after you buy the property. You never know what's going to happen. And there's no way for you to plan for a lot of those costs. But that's one of the cons of buying. You are now responsible for shoveling your snow, fixing any weird problems that may come up, raking leaves. All of these things are now your responsibility as a homeowner. Another problem with buying a home is there's no way to predict that home prices are going to stay high. They might go down, and that's a risk that you take when you buy a home. One of the other things is that it's harder to move. So a lot of the pros and cons with renting and buying kind of contradict each other, or go hand in hand, I guess. So something that's a benefit for renters may be not so great for homeowners. So being able to move quickly as a renter, it doesn't take much. 30 days notice is usually what most leases are. It usually takes longer than 30 days to sell a home, right? Depending on, how much prep you're putting in and how the market is, and just what's happening around you. So as a homeowner, sometimes it is harder to move. Another thing that is difficult as a homeowner is your taxes and insurance. So this is something that even when you finish paying your mortgage, so you've been paying for 30 years, maybe 15 years on a mortgage, your house is paid off, you own it outright, but guess what? You still have to pay taxes and insurance. And these tend to go up over time. So this is something that a lot of people run into, like when their parents pass away and they have their parents' home. Even though the home is paid for and they own it outright, a lot of times these people can't afford to pay the taxes and insurance on an extra home. So this is something that a lot of homeowners run into after they've already paid off the home. So something to consider. Some of the good things about renting, like I said, there's a couple different ones that kind of go against the cons of owning a home. Number one is, depending on your market, the rent can be cheaper than a mortgage payment. And this is really market specific, so be sure and do your research. Make sure you understand this principle and understand what's going on. Remy wants to say hi. So another good thing about renting, like I was saying with your market, is that your rent may be cheaper than a mortgage payment. So the median cost of homeownership in the U.S. Is about $1,500 a month, and I'll link these numbers in the blog post that this video is made from in the comments, so you can check that out. Another thing that you want to look at, so again, about $1,500 a month is your average or your median cost of home ownership. This is from the Census Bureau's 2018 survey, so it may have gone up, it may have gone down a little bit in the last couple years. In Utah County, fair market value for a 3-bedroom rental is currently $1,250 about. So there is a little bit cheaper option for you. So depending on where you're at, depending on your interest rate, what terms you get into on your mortgage, it may be cheaper for you to continue renting. This is something that you really should run the numbers yourself and figure out, what interest rate can I get? Is it a good option for me to keep renting, or should I buy a home? On that, you do not have to pay taxes and homeowners insurance as a renter. So like I was saying, even after you've paid off the home, and sometimes you've been paying for 30 years, right? This is a cost that you avoid as a renter. Your maintenance is typically covered by your landlord, so again, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about dripping sounds. Obviously, you want to call your landlord so that they can get it taken care of, but that's something that you don't have to worry about, calling a plumber or getting those things taken care of. As a renter, there is no down payment required. A lot of times they do require, first and last month's rent, a deposit, but those are things that you get back. And as a homeowner, there's a lot of upfront costs. You've got closing costs, you've got a down payment, you've got a lot of things that upfront are very heavy going into buying a home. So sometimes that's better for people to keep renting. It's easy to move when you're a renter. Like I said before, it takes 30 days notice to your landlord and you can be out of there. So that's something that as a buyer, as a homeowner, is a little bit trickier. So those are some of the pros of renting. Now we're going to move on to my favorite, which are the pros of buying a home. And this is so fun for me because although there are pros and cons to both, I really do think homeownership is an amazing goal to have. And for most people in most places, buying a home just makes sense. Number one reason is your equity growth. So as you're paying a mortgage, you're paying off what you owe on the property, and you're adding equity, you're adding value that you own into the home. So it kind of gives you this wealth building opportunity. I've read different numbers, but kind of the solid number that people go on is those that buy a home end up 40 times wealthier than those that never do. And a lot of that has to do with that equity growth that you're building when you're putting into a home. You've got tax deductions and tax benefits for being a homeowner. Really, tax deductions are one of the biggest things. So anything that you put in as a repair on your home, as well as any interest payments, you can deduct on your taxes. It does take a little more work when you file your taxes, but you're getting deductions. It's forced savings when you're paying off your mortgage. So kind of similar to that equity growth, it's not something that you're actively doing to save money, but it does give you a savings account in a sense that you can use to pay off other expenses if needed down the road. Stability. This is one that my mom always talks about, having your nest. I think it's something that as women, a lot of us like to have our space. We like to have, you know, our home, our nest. And I think that's so true for homeowners. I think you get this sense of belonging in your home. You get a sense of permanence. Even if you know you're going to be leaving in a few years, it's still your home. Whereas renting, you don't get that same sense of stability. Number one reason that I love owning a home is the freedom to do what you want with the property. Our first rental when we got married didn't even allow us to put holes in the wall. So it felt so not like home for me. We didn't get to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do because it wasn't our home. So I can do whatever I want. If I decide I want to paint my bathroom avocado puke green, I can do it. No one's stopping me except every home designer and good person with good sense of design. But there's really no one stopping you from doing what you want. You decide your kitchen's not open concept enough. Tear out that wall, tear out that cabinet. It's all up to you as a homeowner what you get to do. Obviously within restrictions. Sometimes you're in an HOA and they do have restrictions on what you can do with the property, but it's your property. So huge benefit. Another one that I love is your predictable mortgage payment. So one of the first cons we talked about with renting is the unpredictability of rent prices. Your landlord could raise your rent. With a mortgage payment, when you have a fixed interest rate, you are locked into a payment amount. Obviously, like I said, your taxes and insurance can change, so that may change your monthly payment, but your base payment of your mortgage stays the same for the term of the loan. So be sure, you know what to expect every month, and that's a really huge benefit. Depending on the market, so again, this is that depending on the market one, a mortgage payment may be cheaper than renting. So for us, this just made sense. It was cheaper for us to buy a duplex and rent out the upstairs, live in the basement, and pay the mortgage than it would have been to rent a 2-bedroom basement apartment. So it's really interesting. Our renters pay the majority of the mortgage payment. Obviously, this doesn't work in every situation. Not everyone's going to want to live in a basement apartment for, the first few years of their marriage, but that's up to you, right? So that's something that you as the home buyer get to choose. You get to look at your circumstances and see what fits best for you. And I would be happy to sit down with anyone that has questions about any of these pros and cons and go over those questions with you and talk about the benefits of homeownership. I love being a homeowner. I love helping others become a homeowner. I think there's a pride in it, and I feel like it's really part of the American dream to be able to buy your home and do what you wish with it. So be sure to check out my other home buying videos. And if you do have questions, please drop a comment, send me a DM on Instagram, and I will talk to you guys next time.